It's going to be the third Monday of February soon. And you know what that means? It's President's Day. We're going to be diving headfirst into a day filled with potlucks, mattress sales, and heads of state. While there are shared non-religious holidays among many countries around the world, like New Year's Day, Independence Day, and International Women's Day to name a few, President's Day is an exclusive secular holiday that's only celebrated in the United States and other U.S. territories. So, where did President's Day originate from? And what makes it such a uniquely American occasion? Before you grab that extra slice of cherry pie, let's crack open the history books to 224 years back into the past to see how this revered day came to be. Let's also discover a stockpile of fun and oftentimes surprising trivia about our 46 presidents who have served our nation. Maybe you can also share with us, what are your own little traditions and ceremonies to celebrate the fascinating federal holiday that is President's Day? Hello and welcome to History of Life, where we relive history's greatest moments and the eras in between. We're flashing back to almost 2¼ centuries ago to unveil how the celebration of President's Day first began to honor a legendary man. If you'd like to see more fascinating facts, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. We love having you around, so thanks for checking us out. In this modern age, it's common for people to associate President's Day with huge deals on mattresses and other high-end items. But why is that? What does foam have anything to do with our commanders-in-chief? We believe it's important to really get to the heart of the matter at what this often overlooked holiday really symbolizes for all of us, and how we can give it back its historical spotlight. So to start, we'll look back at the origins of how this occasion got earmarked on our national calendar. We'll also explore what were the changes that have transformed this annual affair as it evolved in the last 224 years. Lastly, we'll look back at all 46 presidents and share ideas on how we, as citizens, can keep their memories and legacies alive this President's Day. The colorful, rich history of President's Day all began with this guy, George Washington. Washington's original birth date was recorded as February 11, 1731. During that time, the country was still under British rule, which meant that the empire was still using the Julian calendar as a time measure. Other Catholic countries in Europe around this same time were already adopting the Gregorian calendar, which is what the modern world continues to use today. While there's not much stark difference between the two sets of time measures, the Gregorian calendar was more accurate as it accounted for adjustments brought about by the leap years. In 1752, Britain finally switched over to the Gregorian calendar like the rest of the modern world. Since he was born before this official switch was made, Washington adjusted his birthday to reflect what it would have supposedly been on the Gregorian calendar, which was February 22, 1732, a full 12 months and 11 days from his original birth date. When Washington was elected as the first president of the United States in 1789, he was already a decorated war hero by then, thanks to all his efforts and commendable leadership during the American Revolutionary War. That is why Washington is fondly referred to as the father of our country for leading the Continental Army in defeating the British Empire and finally gaining America its long-awaited independence. Washington, unfortunately, died so suddenly due to a brief illness in 1799, just 2 years after stepping down from office. His death, however, only solidified his status as the single greatest American figure of his time. 100 years after his birth in 1832, alongside the start of construction of the Washington Monument in 1848, were turned into national celebrations. In 1879, an act of Congress was passed to officially mark February 22nd as Washington's birthday each year, wherein government offices would be given time off to celebrate this big day. Almost another century would pass before Washington's birthday would have another shift. You see, this time, legislators wanted to honor not just Washington, but the office of the presidency itself. By this time, Abraham Lincoln was also becoming a prominent key figure in American history, helping him stand in the ranks with Washington as a favorite president of the general populace. In his time holding the highest office in the land, Lincoln led the nation through the American Civil War, thereby preserving the country's constitutional union. He also helped to abolish slavery, while modernizing the country's economy, thanks in part to his huge role in bolstering the federal government. Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, just 10 days ahead of Washington's birth date. For a while, many states had already been observing Lincoln's birthday as a special day, either alongside Washington's birthday or as a separate occasion. In 1951, a first attempt at creating an official President's Day was endeavored. They aimed to make March 4th, the original inauguration day, for the incoming president to be the official President's Day, but the bill stalled at the Senate. The lawmakers felt that March 4th was just too close to Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday to create another holiday. Thankfully, the movement would restart again a little over 20 years later when it was finally passed into law. Isn't it good to know that despite passing away centuries ago, we are still honoring two of our most heroic and self-sacrificing presidents and making sure that their memories are kept alive? We won't keep you waiting for long because we're about to dig deeper into how President's Day became an official federal holiday that is unique for America and its territories. If you're enjoying this video, we hope you can hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so we can share more captivating history tidbits to you. After the first attempt at allotting the annual official President's Day in 1951, another movement restarted 20 years later, and this time it succeeded. The Uniform Monday Holiday Act was passed into law, which saw two already existing federal holidays, Washington's birthday and Memorial Day, redesignated to permanent Mondays into the calendar as opposed to having them on a set calendar date. This meant that Memorial Day, previously celebrated every May 30th, was now scheduled for the last Monday of May each year. Meanwhile, Washington's birthday became more known as President's Day and was now observed every third Monday of February. The Uniform Monday Holiday Act also officially recognized Columbus Day as a federal holiday, which is kept every second Monday of October. As for President's Day, the spotlight that was merely on Washington and Lincoln now also illuminated all other presidents. This time, President's Day was there to celebrate all the highest leaders of our land, particularly those who've already passed on. When the Uniform Monday Holiday Act was initially deliberated, it did meet some opposition. Understandably, there were some lawmakers who felt that lumping Washington and Lincoln to a memorial with all the rest diminished their individual legacies. In fact, there were even some who felt Washington and Lincoln deserved their own Memorial Days each. In spite of the opposition, the bill was passed into federal law. There are still some states, however, who continue to observe their own state holidays dedicated to either one or both legendary presidents, like George Washington Day in Virginia, Washington's birthday in Connecticut, Washington's birthday in New Jersey, and Washington and Lincoln Day in Utah. Alabama even takes it a notch further by celebrating a George Washington Thomas Jefferson birthday. How exactly did President's Day transform into a massive retail event over time? Advertising experts maintain that shopping for high-ticket items tend to get subdued after the Christmas season. Since President's Day is the next big 3-day weekend after Christmas, people can splurge again for costlier items, and the 3-day weekend gives them ample time to really think about getting a new mattress or not. As time passed, retailers used the long 3-day weekend on President's Day as a time to avail deep discounts to entice shoppers to splurge on these high-ticket items like mattresses or furniture pieces or cars. Federal and state government services are closed for the long weekend, while so do most schools and universities. In Washington's hometown of Alexandria in Virginia, the town celebrates with what is considered to be the longest and largest parade in honor of Washington. Meanwhile, at the George Washington Birthplace Monument in Westmoreland County, in Virginia, tourists and guests can partake in birthday celebrations during the long holiday. And in the town of Eustis in Florida, the annual George Fest takes place, a day filled with live music, fireworks, carnival rides, and a float parade that first began in 1902. They even have a cherry pie eating contest in honor of Washington's childhood experience with a cherry tree and his hatchet. Legend has it that a 6-year-old George Washington was gifted a hatchet by his father, and to test it out, he cut off his father's cherry tree. His father was so upset, but when young George owned up to it, his father forgave him, valuing his honesty. While many historians say this is pure myth manufactured by a 19th century Washington biographer, the cherry tree story has certainly stuck, which is why cherry pie is always a must-have during President's Day. As for the rest of our presidents, here's a fun trivia for each of them for you. John Adams. He was an avid writer who wrote his wife, Abigail, 1,100 love letters, with some you can actually find in several museums today. Thomas Jefferson. One of his favorite hobbies, apart from reading, was stargazing, as he was so fascinated by astronomy. James Madison. At just 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighing barely 100 pounds, he was the smallest president in American history. James Monroe. He was the last president in history who was never photographed throughout his whole life. John Quincy Adams. He was gifted an alligator by a French general, which he kept in a bathtub in the White House for some time. Andrew Jackson. He engaged in a duel in 1806 with known Tennessee writer Charles Dickinson and was shot in the chest, but thankfully, he survived. Martin Van Buren. He was the first president who was born when the United States of America was no longer part of the British Empire and was now a free country. William Henry Harrison. Sadly, he had the shortest presidency term ever, just lasting exactly 1 month into his inauguration after dying from a sudden illness. John Tyler. He was the only president in history who sided with the Confederates, but died suddenly before he could join the Confederate Congress in 1862. James K. Polk. He was a workaholic who preferred to work 12 hours a day, and throughout his one term as president, he was known to have taken off only for a total of 27 days. Zachary Taylor. He died just a little over a year after being inaugurated, widely speculated to have been from contracting cholera after eating fresh cherries and drinking warm milk on a hot summer's day. Millard Fillmore. Alongside his wife, he founded the very first permanent White House library and even helped to put out a fire at the Library of Congress in 1851. Franklin Pierce. He retired after his first term to help care for his grieving wife after all their 3 sons had died successively, with no one of them making it past the age of 12. James Buchanan. He was the only president in American history who never married, instead using his niece, Harriet Lane, to serve as his first lady. Abraham Lincoln. Standing at 6 foot 4 inches, he was the tallest president in our history, and he was also the first president to be born outside of the 13 original states. Andrew Johnson. Because he grew up in abject poverty, he was the only president who never went to school, but he eventually taught himself to read and write. Ulysses S. Grant. Unlike all other presidents before him, he had no previous experience working as an elected official, but his reputation as a notable military man was what propelled him to the highest office. Rutherford B. Hayes. He held the very first Easter egg roll in the White House in 1878, a tradition that still continues on until today. James A. Garfield. He was the 3rd president, after Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln, with an assassination attempt at his life, and sadly didn't make it as he died 2 months after from complications. Chester A. Arthur. He had an eye for fashion and dressed up differently for each occasion throughout the day, earning him the moniker Elegant Arthur. Grover Cleveland. He is the only president in our history to have served 2 non-consecutive terms, first from 1885 to 1889, and again from 1893 to 1897. Benjamin Harrison. It was during his presidential term when the White House first had electricity, and he was the first president to ever have his voice recorded. William McKinley. He had the best meet-cute story ever by ending up married to his sweetheart, Ida Sexton, in spite spilling a tray of strawberry ice cream onto her white dress. Theodore Roosevelt. Because of his refusal to shoot an old bear tied to a tree during a hunting trip, he inspired a Brooklyn candy shop owner to make a stuffed bear, which he dedicated to him, naming it Teddy Bear, and so the iconic toy was born. William Howard Taft. He was the first president to own a car, converting the White House stables into a garage, while being the last president to keep a cow in the White House complex as a source for fresh milk. Woodrow Wilson. He is the only U.S. president to be buried in Washington, D.C., as his remains lie in a sarcophagus at the Washington National Cathedral. Warren G. Harding. His presidential campaign was heavily supported by box office 1920s singer and actor Al Jolson before celebrity endorsements for presidential candidates became a thing. Calvin Coolidge. He was an avid animal lover who collected cats, birds, and even cows, but his most famous pet was a raccoon, which he gave to his wife and named it Rebecca Raccoon. Herbert Hoover. He previously worked as a mining engineer in China, which is why he and his wife, Lu, were fluent in speaking Mandarin, which they would use when they wanted to have a private dialogue. Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was the first sitting president to ever fly in a plane in 1932, and the first sitting president to leave the country during wartime as he met up with British Prime Minister Winston Churchill in Morocco in 1943. For Harry S. Truman, he was expected to lose to Republican Thomas Dewey in the 1948 elections, but he made an astounding rebound in his campaign, which has been immortalized with him holding up a newspaper with a wrongly predicted headline saying, "Dewey defeats Truman." Dwight D. Eisenhower. He became an avid painter in midlife, painting more than 200 artworks, with his favorite subjects being landscapes. His wife Mamie, George Washington, and Abraham Lincoln. John F. Kennedy. He is the only American president in history to be awarded a Purple Heart after his valiant efforts in the Pacific during World War II. Lyndon B. Johnson. As Texan natives, he and his wife, Lady Bird, loved to feature Texan flavors into the menus at the White House, like barbecue and peach ice cream. Richard Nixon. After his departure from office, he authored several nonfiction books on domestic and international affairs, including his own autobiography, R.N. The Memoirs of Richard Nixon. Gerald R. Ford. His real name assigned to him at birth was Leslie Lynch King Jr., which he officially changed in 1935 in honor of his stepfather, Gerald Rudolph Ford, whom he adored and looked up to. Jimmy Carter. He is known for being a speed reader, reading at a superb rate of up to 2,000 words a minute, a knack which he passed on to his daughter Amy. Ronald Reagan. He suffered a partial loss of hearing in one ear after a gun was fired close to his ear on a movie set in the late 1930s when he was still working as an actor. George H.W. Bush. Upon winning the presidential elections in 1989, he was the first sitting vice president to win as president in 153 years after Martin Van Buren first accomplished the same feat. Bill Clinton. He was a well-recognized saxophone player in high school, earning the prestige of first chair in a state band of students. But he made a drastic career change after a 1963 chance meeting with John F. Kennedy as a 17-year-old boy. George W. Bush. He and his father, George H.W. Bush, were the second father-son duo to have become American presidents, with John Adams and John Quincy Adams preceding them by 175 years. Barack Obama. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 for his efforts in strengthening international diplomacy and cooperation, becoming only the fourth president to receive the prestigious honor. Donald Trump. He is the second U.S. president, after Ronald Reagan, to take on the presidency as a divorced man, bringing in his third wife, Melania, to be his first lady. Joe Biden. He attempted to run for president in 3 different decades, first in 1987 and then in 2008, and ultimately in 2020 when he finally succeeded and won the seat. While it's fitting that special tribute is given to Washington and Lincoln for everything they've done, President's Day should also be a time to celebrate all the various leaderships that have come to steer our country. Let's remember the sacrifices and legacies of our nation's leaders through the generations, and let's hope their stories inspire us to be active citizens. As we celebrate President's Day once again, we're reminded of our storied history as a democratic nation, and perhaps look forward to our first female president one day in the future. Thank you for watching History of Life. We hope this deep dive on President's Day has given you more insight into our nationhood. Like this video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to know when the next one comes out. See you in the next video.